As of the second most recent chapter in One Piece, one of the biggest things being talked about is whether or not Luffy is going to fight Queen, and if so, who would win? Now, my opinions on those two questions are pretty strong, as my opinions tend to be, and honestly I didn't really think I would get that much dissonance on the topic. As far as whether or not Luffy will or will not fight, it seems to me most people agree that it's bound to happen at this point, but on the contrary, a lot of people believe Queen would defeat Luffy, unlike myself. Like I said, I didn't think this would be a hugely debatable topic, but since it seems I was wrong on that one, I find this to be a great opportunity to share my opinion on the latter point. So I think that Luffy would defeat Queen in a fair 1v1 fight, and I think it's pretty obvious that Luffy would, both from a power scaling and storytelling perspective. In terms of power scaling, Luffy has recently stalemated the top commander of Yonko Big Mom's crew. While I have on multiple occasions explained how there is a decent sized range in power from the weakest to strongest top Yonko commanders, as well as all the Yonko commanders below them, I think that generally speaking a top Yonko commander is going to be stronger than any regular Yonko commander. In other words, I find it quite hard to believe that Katakuri would be weaker than Queen, and since most people seem to consider Katakuri much more powerful than I do, I doubt there will be too much disagreement on that one. Also remember that as of immediately after Luffy stalemated Katakuri, I was not convinced that Luffy was actually quite as strong as him yet, and there was some events taking place and actions, or lack thereof, on Katakuri's part that make it a stretch to consider Luffy that strong at the time. Like I said though, I think there would be a decent gap between Katakuri and Queen anyway, so for Luffy to be approaching that level makes me believe that Luffy could probably defeat him at even that time. So to summarize my take on the power scaling here, because Luffy did so well against Katakuri, I think that logically speaking, he would be able to defeat Queen. Now on to the storytelling perspective. Oda has sent Luffy to Wano's jail for what in retrospect now seems like a pretty arbitrary reason, and dare I say maybe even a little bit of a plot contrivance. Even though Luffy does stupid shit all the time and it doesn't generally break my suspension of disbelief, this seemed a little over the top even for Luffy, and at that time I couldn't figure out why it was necessary. Now of course it is quite clear, and I even made a video talking about this, Luffy had to be sent to jail so he could have a little training arc where he is forced to do massive amounts of hard manual labor while being significantly weakened by sea stone cuffs, so of course when he takes them off it's going to give him a huge power boost, basically like when Rock Lee takes off his weights against Gaara. As if there wasn't already enough evidence for this, in the chapter we now see Luffy is going to be participating in a tournament which happens immediately after he gets his cuffs taken off. So, especially the damage Luffy just showed off with his Conqueror's Haki, I think it goes without saying that the only person in that prison who might have presented a challenge to him is Queen himself. If Luffy does end up fighting against Queen, it only makes sense that he will defeat him maybe even more easily than you would think, because that was the entire purpose of having him have this training arc. And now that it's over, we immediately get a chance to see just how much Luffy has grown. It's basically exactly the same as the 7 Deadly Sins training arc, where Meliodas goes from not being able to put a scratch on one of the weaker commandments to having his power returned, immediately demanding to be teleported to their location, and then absolutely wiping the floor with said commandment. Just logically speaking, there is no way Oda would go through all this trouble of having Luffy get one-shotted by Kaido just to take him to prison, just to show us him training with sea stone cuffs, just to put him in a situation for him to fight Queen after having spent tons of time getting stronger just to have him lose. At that point, the real question is whether or not he will even fight Queen, and with all this being said, I think that's a solid yes for me. So that's basically everything I wanted to say on this topic. I would imagine the majority of people already agreed with me, but there definitely was a decent amount of people who didn't, so I thought it was worth talking about. Also, if you saw my most recent video, I ended up by saying that it was kind of short because, you know, there were so many different points on the most recent chapter that I wanted to tackle them one by one. And now I made this video, which is actually talking about the chapter before that one, so it's kind of weird. But I made this script and everything for this chapter, and I did like this actual topic, so I still wanted to do it, and I figured it only made sense to do it not just before I get to the next chapter's content. However, even more importantly, before the next chapter comes out, where this becomes totally irrelevant. So I wanted to get this out here for you guys. Again, I apologize for the short video. Thank you very much for watching this far if you've made it here. If you enjoyed this video, remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Remember to leave me a comment letting me know what you thought about this video, if you agree with me, or if you're one of those people who disagree with me. I don't know. Maybe you do. I think that's a little weird, especially after I've laid everything out here, but give me your argument. I'd like to hear your side. With that all being said, I hope you guys have an excellent rest of your day, a great weekend, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.